while I was also doing that research, I was getting my undergraduate degree in psychology and education. So there were sort of these two parallel tracks that were going on. I was also a researcher at Princeton's Engineering Anomalies Research Lab. And this was pretty interesting.
Engineering anomalies.
Yeah, so what it was there was a multi-million-dollar grant to look at how consciousness might influence subtle electrical and mechanical systems.
Okay.
So it was basically,
like random number generators and things of the sort.
Yeah, we would create.
Other systems.
Yeah, we would. So yeah, they were called regs, and we would create a variety of different displays that those regs would generate randomness into, and people would try to influence those systems with their mind. And so things from waterfalls to falling cascading balls to, we had a little robotic machine that would move around a little frog on a table. So we would try to come up with creative ways of influencing these things and seeing basically, if it's possible or not.
Right. What did you determine?
Well, that it is. There's a small effect, but a large effect size over time. So, thousands of operators, millions of experiments. There's absolutely something that's occurring, and it seems to be a capacity that it's simply sort of like that paradox, I guess, or apparent paradox in physics. Where consciousness, when you observe a system, it influences it.
I am Allah, I am Yahweh Ababa, no one may testify.
All right, in this video, I have a conversation with Dr. Scott Flagg, who is a psychologist who has written this book called Real Psychology, where he helps people unravel the psyche and find out what is the root of their issues and how to liberate themselves through this process. And so it was a fascinating conversation. We're going to dive into some of those principles that he talks about in his book, as well as some other very pressing and interesting questions that affect pretty much every human today. So fascinating conversation, and just got to find out a little bit about Scott's background. Fascinating guy as well, and has some experiences when he's very young that really helped to shape him in this direction of wanting to discover and know and understand and unravel the human psyche and the mysteries of consciousness. So should be a good listen. I hope you enjoy it. And thanks again to Scott for coming on the program. And also you can find out more about him at drflagg.com. That's drflagg.com. Or again, in the links I'll put in the description. All right. Enjoy. Thanks for coming on, brother.
Thank you
for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think this will be probably a pretty in-depth, detailed conversation about human life in all its different facets. So
Cool. Well, that's exciting. There's certainly a lot to talk about. Life is unfolding in very extraordinary, profound, strange ways these days, it seems like. What an interesting time to be alive.
It is. It really is. And I think as that complexity outside of us increases, it really means that we have to have a strong internal compass. And, one of the things that I think is kind of universally true is we all want to understand things before we approach them, but you can't understand anything if your approach is off. So we have to make sure that our approach to life is correct. Otherwise, we're going to miss the boat. And it's a pretty short boat ride, I think. In general, it's 80 years maybe, and that's not much time to really figure out purposefulness and cultivate real skill and live a full life. So
and course correct along the way.
You can't forget that, because we all have to do that.
So what has been your approach to enable that process?
Well, I guess in the broadest sense, there may be two overarching kind of directions, I guess, in talking about myself. We could talk about the psychological, and then I guess we could talk more about the maybe it's the mystical. And I guess if we were to break that down, it would be the psychological and maybe the internal practices, and then maybe the external parapsychological research and things that I've done over the course of my life.
Cool.
So,
Can we just jump into a little bit of your background then and how you got started in all this before you lay that out a little bit, so
Sure.
people understand like where your perspective comes from?
Yeah. It's a tough question, right? I guess it's kind of like, what was it, Daniel in Interview with a Vampire, who asked Lestat, so start at the beginning. And he's like, I was born, I grew up, I died, I was born again. So it's a hard question, like, where did the path begin? When I was pretty young, in my early teens, I had some, to me, they were very unusual, energetic experiences. So laying in bed at night, early in the morning, as I was waking up, I'd have sort of surges of energy through my body. And it was very uncomfortable. And that came and went. And then later in life, in my 20s, as I was falling asleep, I had a number of out-of-body experiences. I guess most people refer to them as like astral projection experiences.
Right.
And that got me very interested in both psychology and parapsychology, the nature of consciousness, specific ways of trying to replicate and re-experience, so I could understand, because they were they were very transformative experiences for me. And over the years, that's what I found, whether they're precognitive dreams or whether they're unusual things that people have observed, these experiences, exceptional human experiences, are the most transformative events. They change the course of people's lives. So in my late teens, I started doing parapsychological research. I was eventually a director of the American Institute of Parapsychology. I went all over the world interviewing people who had near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, thought that they were possessed or had haunting, phenomena in their house. And so while I was also doing that research, I was getting my undergraduate degree in psychology and education. So there were sort of these two parallel tracks that were going on. I was also a researcher at Princeton's Engineering Anomalies Research Lab. And this was pretty interesting.
Engineering anomalies.
Yeah, so what it was there was a multi-million-dollar grant to look at how consciousness might influence subtle electrical and mechanical systems.
Okay.
So it was basically,
like random number generators and things of the sort.
Yeah, we would
and
create
other systems.
Yeah, we would. So yeah, they were called regs, and we would create a variety of different displays that those regs would generate randomness into, and people would try to influence those systems with their mind. And so things from waterfalls to falling cascading balls to, we had a little robotic machine that would move around a little frog on a table. So we would try to come up with creative ways of influencing these things and seeing basically, if it's possible or not.
Right. What did you determine?
Well, that it is. There's a small effect, but a large effect size over time. So, thousands of operators, millions of experiments. There's absolutely something that's occurring, and it seems to be a capacity that it's simply sort of like that paradox, I guess, or apparent paradox in physics. Where consciousness, when you observe a system, it influences it.
Mm-hmm.
So there are all kinds of implications to that, none that have been really fully capitalized. But it obviously shows and points to the notion that there's more going on than our simple senses can register. Yeah. And this is something that I think is incredibly important, that psychology has completely neglected. Are these broader, harder questions of our existence, to simplify our life down to just the mind as we perceive it in these simple reductionary kinds of theories and models, it isn't sufficient.
Right. It doesn't. It certainly, it means that these anomalies have to be discounted, not looked at, not studied, just written off basically because they don't fit the model. Yeah. Rather than saying, maybe there's something wrong with the model because these things do appear.
Yeah.
So if they don't fit the model, this tells us something about the model, not about the thing that we're observing.
It's the easiest solution to a problem ever, right? It's you imagine the problem doesn't exist. You just,
Yeah.
you just say the problem doesn't exist, and it's not real, and so that gives you a sense of control, and that's just not, that's never been my interest. I think because I've had such a range of experiences and just an innate fascination, with life and purposefulness, try to maximize what it is that this is all about. And how do you do that if you have no understanding of the mechanisms? It's a lot like meditation, which I'm guessing we'll talk about, and some of those internal practices. If you don't have some understanding of it, how are you going to do it with intentionality?
Well, this comes back to what you were saying before too about people want to understand something before they do it.
Yes.
And this, we learn in the internal arts that it doesn't work like that. We get the direct experience of that confronted, regularly, because you don't know what you're doing.
Right.
You don't know what you're doing, and you haven't developed the capacity to do it, and you're trying to do something that you don't understand.
Yeah.
And, then questions arise, and that takes us further away from the truth of it, right? The truth of the matter. We have to actually do it to the best of our ability, and then over time, doing it with sincerity over and over and over again, something starts to click, and it's like, now I'm understanding something.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why so many good teachers, they're just like, shut up and just do what I'm telling you to do, right? It's if nothing else, it's keeping you from, going down rabbit holes and misrelating to the experience, because you're going to misrelate to the experience that you're having.
Yep.
And that's part of the practice is giving you guidance in the approach so that you don't misrelate to your experience. And this is what psychology should do. This is the essence of the responsibility, and instead it's become this kind of weak, feel good, validate your feelings. I saw some BetterHelp ad on YouTube, a couple of weeks back, and it's this, to me, repulsive woman who's sitting there saying, your feelings are valid. And it's like, are your feelings valid if they're derived from misperceiving the world? What does valid mean? Valid to me means that they're functional. It means that, you might, in following them or being controlled by them, they would lead you somewhere constructive. But that's rarely the case with our emotions. Our emotions misguide us all the time because we're misperceiving the world all the time. So, yeah, we have to do more than just trust in our experience. That's part of the equation, but it's not that simple. You have to have some guidance and have some clarity of approach. And so, I guess in a minute or two, that's, part of why I wrote the Real book.
Yeah, Real Psychology.
Yes.
Yep. So, the danger is to fabricate something or to just go completely astray without the guidance, without proper methods, and without rigorous self-honesty, sincerity, and integrity.
And I think this is something that people vary in a lot. I've never wanted to fool myself. And I think because innately I've always questioned, from an observing standpoint, my experiences. And so for me, like if I share an experience, often, you hear teachers say, just kind of don't even worry about it. Don't attend to it at all. You may be conflating it, or I don't want to tell you milestones or markers along the way because, you might just experience those out of a desire to want to experience them. I haven't found that to be so much the case in myself. I don't know exactly what element that is. I think it's probably because I'm such a solitary practitioner. I've spent so many years just doing the work myself that, whether that's psychological work or whether that's, internal arts, cultivation work. But I think we have to form that drive and assertion within ourselves where we are trying, we realize like life is an opportunity for us to figure out what no one else has figured out. It is an opportunity for us to answer some of the questions that, you know, your parents, your grandparents, our ancestors, millions of other human beings have never, you know, really fully gotten true understanding of. And so, I don't know, I've always, like, that challenge, it's like, why would I want to trick myself? You know, why would I want to fool myself? And I think some of that was also cultivated early on, going to places, you know, and exploring haunted houses and interviewing people who had had near-death experiences or the like, because why trick yourself? You know, it's like, you know, something's going on.
Yes. So rather than settle for something that's, you know, doesn't have substance, when there is actually much of substance, but it takes work to get there. And, you know, I think that's one thing that can deter people, or, you know, just cause them to not out of malintention, or not lacking in sincerity, but just not understanding how difficult and what they're up against when they begin to do this internal search and uncover what's inside. I mean, just in my own experience, for sure, I've noticed, you know, time and again where I had maybe come to a conclusion, a realization, an understanding, but then over time, something arose, a new realization occurred where I saw how that was actually like a pattern that I had developed to a strategy to deal with something that was deeper, and actually not deal with it, not look at it, not face it. Because now I have this nice little strategy that keeps everything organized and you know, coherent and sane and things, and so I'm fine. I'm good.
And that's kind of the field of psychology, I think, has kind of become some of those superficial strategies. And that's why, you know, the real psychology, you know, book, it's a total, complete, you know, it's the beginnings of a total, complete framework of the psychology of, you know, human life. And there aren't any other ones like that. The next closest thing is like psychoanalysis, probably, and it also doesn't really answer some of the most fundamental questions. And so, this is it. It matters a lot, right? You know,
well, it's still built on that materialistic framework, as well.
Yeah.
So, well, take us through the real process, and maybe if even we could talk about like an issue that someone might have that they would use this process to sort of unravel it.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think that's a great way to look at it. So, kind of starting, it's an acronym. It stands for REAL, stands for Rational Emotional Analysis in Liberation. And so it starts with being rational. Nothing works if we're not rational. But that's a really tricky concept. You know, how do we cultivate clear seeing? You know, it's like we're saying that's both the fundamental problem is that we don't see and perceive things correctly. And then we're also saying that, okay, we have to correct that as much as we can from the beginning. So it's a tricky thing. And so this is why we meditate. This is the process of mindfulness. So, you know, in just about any spiritual tradition, and, you know, psychology has adopted it, but it doesn't really describe why we meditate, why we need to be mindful. I'm sure you've seen, you know, a million different explanations, a million different types of meditation, you know, promoted. And the problem with all of this is that they don't get down to what is it that we're trying to accomplish through the cultivation of specific skills. So the function of mindfulness is so we can be rational. How can you be rational if you're not present-minded? How can you be rational if you don't accept reality? How can you be rational if you don't look in the right way at the right thing? So mindfulness cultivates those skills, and it allows us to be rational. So on one level, all the meditation work that we're doing, all the, just one level, of course, that we're trying to develop those skills, it's just so that we're rational. It's so that we can approach life reasonably.
Well, it seems also that if I'm not present, then I don't have the opportunity to question the irrational.
Yes.
Like, the program is running, and regardless of what happens, it runs this way.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it goes. And if I'm not there to inspect it, then I can't see, oh, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And these
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, these three things are synergistic. It's you're right. You can't get anything correct if you're not present, right? And it also brings up the idea of regulation of the mind, working with the mind. It's sort of like imagination. You can imagine anything, but that doesn't mean you should. Our mind can venture into the past and it can venture into the future, but that doesn't mean that it should, right? We need to understand when that's appropriate so that we can cultivate a mind that isn't just like most of our minds, just rampantly going all over the place all the time. I think, the number is something, like 60% of the time, most people are living in the past. So it's and so you're missing your whole life, right? It's like watching, it's like recording your life, not paying attention to it, and then watching it afterwards. And this causes a lot of anxiety and depression and other things. So the three things are synergistic too, those three, and these are just the most, basic qualities of skills of meditation. But how can you be, say, accepting if you're not present? How can you be looking with loving, curious interest if you're not present? Mm-hmm. So the three things work off of each other, those three skills, and they facilitate what we call mindfulness. They come together, they converge, and it's a different state of mind. They've done, Herbert Benson was one of the pioneers in this, but, measuring Dumo meditators, while they were in, essentially a samadhi-like state. And when you're in a highly focused but very relaxed state, which is very different than, maybe we'll talk about the fight or flight response later on, and the problems with that. But when you can be very present, aware, and have a good quality of focus, but your nervous system be really relaxed, you have a high degree of freedom in life, right? You can choose rather than these things controlling you.
Yes.
Yeah.
The capacity for freedom actually has opened up too. This is something that, when it really first started happening to me, I was like, oh wow, this is freedom. Like, prior to having the experience of, opening inside, let's say, and dropping of some of the, programs and things, mm-hmm. the freedom was like a concept. It's like, oh, freedom, I get it. It means like more space, to roam around, more choices, maybe more financial freedom to make those choices and things like that. That's what freedom is. But then I started experiencing things like, oh, this is freedom. It's like somehow I already knew what it was when I experienced it. But when I had it as a concept, it was like something I was trying to get to, conditions in my life. That means freedom. But actually, it's an inner state. And then the external stuff is all nice and well and good. But if I don't have it inside, it doesn't really matter what the circumstances of my life are. I won't experience that freedom, which is what we really are after.
Yeah, what's the point, right? If you're trapped within your mind, it's not freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, it has to be lived. Freedom is a lived thing, and that's why it's so important. That's part of why there is an external. That's part of why duality exists, is it's a playground, it's practice. And because there's an external, there's an internal, we're more identified and sort of protected within our collapsed identity. there's more we can get into with that. Maybe we'll kind of pick that thread up maybe later. But the just to kind of get back to the acronym and not lose that entirely. So that the rational side of it is something that we have to cultivate. So we cultivate it through mindfulness, and part of mindfulness is the mind. So what are some of the major problems that the mind might contaminate our experiences with? One of, you could call it reductionism. I often refer to it as judgment. So we go through life judging all of our experiences from an incredibly ignorant standpoint. So part of the process of acceptance in mindfulness is that it suspends judgment. So what judgment is right, wrong, good, bad, preferences and things that control us. So nothing in the whole universe is right or wrong, good or bad. When we think in those kinds of ways, it reduces our thinking. It's the stupidest form of thinking that could exist. It's so stupid, in fact, that we don't realize how stupid the process itself is. We just are stuck in our judgments. So this is part of why acceptance is so important, is that it keeps our judgments at bay and it cultivates discernment.
Okay. So, and discernment, so this is a word that often gets conflated with judgment, and maybe we can ease out the difference just a little bit really quickly, because someone might say, well, killing an innocent child is just bad. It's just wrong. There is no gray area. It just is. So that's a judgment, or is it a discernment? And what's the difference?
Yeah, so that's kind of the most extreme classic example, though. That's everyone, it's a great example because everyone comes up with it. And what you're seeing is somebody who's examining judgment but then collapsing right back into judgment. Right, so it's just a repetition of another judgment on top of judgments. It's like saying, I hate racists because all racists are bad. Mm-hmm. But there's no examination of why do human beings have racist components in us. I mean, we have evolved. It's obviously something that's deeply imprinted into the human psyche, into the human animal. It's much better to try to parse out and discern and understand these things than it is to say it's bad. It doesn't get us anywhere. It stops us in our tracks, and it causes us to perpetuate some of the most fundamental reductionary types of thinking that keep us from evolving. Right. So it's that idea, it's one of the greatest traps. I think of it as kind of like, I don't know if you fished a lot as a kid, but I spent hours out in this pond in my backyard, probably catching the same 10 fish over and over again, But it's like if a fish hook has bait on it, and you snag the fish and maybe it wrestles away, maybe you don't hook it right, but the bait is right there. The bait and the hook are still right there. It's right when we have made an error that is the most likely time that we're going to take the bait again. And so we really have to watch this, especially in the way that we're thinking, because you're going to keep approaching things, or anyone is going to keep approaching things in the same way they always have. Right? So you start to analyze something like judgment, and you're going to judge judgment. Mm-hmm. So there's that. Discernment is where we suspend judgment and we observe the qualities. We look deeply, mindfully. So we look presently instead of contaminating what we're seeing with the past. So say you're having an argument with your wife or girlfriend, you could drag the whole past into that moment and misinterpret, misalign what it is that's occurring. And I think we've all done that, right? We bring up the past, we bring up all these pattern things, and the person's like, that's not what I'm talking about. Like, that's not what's going on here. And it's a conflict in the way that we're approaching it. So we have to be able to be present, to be accepting of what is, We have to accept some of the most difficult problems because it's the most loving, compassionate, purposeful way of examining things. I mentioned racism or sexism, or, you could talk about rape, or you could talk about politics, you could talk about any of these really difficult, challenging things. What we're all doing is we're all yelling at each other and pointing fingers at each other and calling each other stupid. And we're not really examining the underlying problems. And that's what we need to do mindfully. And so that's part of the purpose of mindfulness and how it makes us rational.
All right. Okay. So that's step one.
Yep, step one. So what do you do with that? Right? And this is kind of the broader problem of meditation. Like, what do you do with it? How do you apply it? How do you use this universal key selectively to kind of unlock your specific chains, the specific things that hold all of us down or limit us? Mm-hmm. And so it's really important that we do that. But there's a universal answer, and we have to apply that first to our emotions. Our emotions are a very, very primitive aspect of our brains and our being. All mammals have emotions. So, there was, I don't know, when I was growing up, everybody was like, does your dog really have feelings? Does your cat have feelings? Yeah, every mammal has feelings. They're a very, I'm saying simplistic, not because they're not beautiful and have complexity, but they're simplistic in that, for human beings, we have maybe 7 emotions. So you have 7 templated responses to the world. 7 foundational ways of experiencing the world, and we experience everything emotionally. You get a flat tire, you're going to have some emotion about it, right? It's everything, even though that, like, your tire it doesn't care that you have emotions. Much of the world, they don't care what your emotions are. Mm-hmm. So I have clients sometimes, and it always throws them off their game a little bit. They'll say, I'm depressed, and I'll be like, great, it's great you're depressed, because at least something is arising into awareness that we can work with. And then the other thing is, who cares what you're feeling? It isn't about validating our emotions. And I'll explain this a little more in a minute. You have feet. Do you need to validate that you have feet, or do you need to learn how to walk? You don't need to validate the fact that you have feet.
Yep. No, I knew a guy, and he had this line that anytime, and people talk generally, when I was much younger, people didn't say, like, I feel like this and that. They would usually say, I think this or that. Yeah. Now, the current has changed, and people use that feeling word all the time. Yeah. I feel like this is a good idea, right? And he would say, I don't give a fuck about your feelings, Holmes.
Exactly.
And it was shocking to me at first.
Yeah.
I was like, what do you mean? And then I realized, it's just irrelevant. And most people are giving them way, way, way too much credence. And he was just being honest.
Yeah.
And letting me know that what most people think and feel also, they don't really give a fuck about your feelings.
Right. And this is why, strangely enough, this is why emotions are such a key component. Because if you think about yourself, that is one of the most principal aspects. How I feel, right, is so tied in with my self-identification, with my ego, with the construct that exists within me, right? It's inseparable. And this is why. So why are our emotions, when we think of how we feel, as being so personal and so intrinsic to who we are? It's because it's such a fundamental evolutionary adaptation. Our emotional centers are deep in our brain. They are one of the first things that evolved. They're deeply, deeply ingrained in every aspect of our nervous system, and they control us. So everyone is like looking around, why are people doing all these stupid things? It's not IQ. Our society values IQ more than anything. It's like the smarter you are, the more prestigious you are or something. And what limits intelligence more than anything is emotional regulation. Right? You could be the smartest person on earth, but if you aren't emotionally well regulated, if you don't know how to relate to your emotions, all you're going to do is wreak havoc. So we don't have intelligence so that we can make iPhones and so we can launch Teslas into space. That's not the principal function. It's maybe a secondary thing that's beneficial. The principal reason that we have intelligence and self-awareness is so we can direct that awareness internally, especially to these most basic aspects that might control us, our drives, our emotions, and we can relate to those things with some self-direction. So we have these giant frontal lobes, these giant brains, we have self-awareness, we have all this stuff, so that it's like the next evolutionary step. If we had to evolve just through biological processes, it's taken a long time to get us here. But you or I or a listener, through conscious awareness, you can shortcut that process, right? You can practice things. You can put yourself in certain environments. You can cultivate yourself at an accelerated rate. And that's why it exists.
Yep. All right. And we'll get into that too here in a bit. But I think that takes us to step 3.
Yeah. So we're rationally looking at our emotions, and then we have to analyze them. So what I mean by analysis is it's mindful observing. It means that we're focused on that because our emotions are the principal thing that might control us, and the principal thing that our identity is constructed around. So higher order thought comes later on, right? It's if you look at all the different animals in the world, higher order thought is something that's it may have co-evolved along with emotion, but the ability to think in complex ways is a really new component of being a human being. So, but we need to use that, right, in order to look at ourselves. And so you look at your emotions, and when you look at them, you can understand why they are arising. So this is, why do you feel the way that you feel? That's where most psychology stops. That's, believe it or not, it's why do you feel that way? And then let me tell you that your feelings are valid, and let me empathize with your feelings, right?
Yeah, totally.
That is absolutely inadequate. Why do we even have empathy? Like when we think about compassion and empathy, and you think about, maybe a therapist that you like who, maybe they end up being more of a friend than someone who's actually, giving you real guidance and helping you get unstuck. What a lot of people like is we like empathy. We like compassion because it validates who we are.
Yeah, I mean, the whole school of, what is it, humanism?
Yeah.
Right? It was based on that, just being present and being empathetic and listening. And that's enough. That's enough to heal the person all the way down to the bones.
How could that be enough? It's validating who you are as a stuck, confused individual who does not have the right approach in life. And I can say that, it sounds cruel, but we all do. I can say that because I've examined myself endlessly, right? And
yes.
It's so it's true. We don't need someone validating our emotions, our experiences, to the degree that it keeps us stuck. So the function of that kind of validation of empathy, like why do we have empathy? It's so that we can understand. If I take on your emotions, there's a chance that I could, if I relate to them correctly, I could understand you deeply. But the problem is the understanding component is almost never there. So by understanding, what I mean is, say I'm angry, and that emotion is its function, right? I'm angry because I stubbed my toe. That emotion, right, makes me, its function, I can see I want to punch something. So it's a way of lashing out, it's a way of establishing a boundary, it's a way of asserting some dominance, right?
Or just
problem
dispersing the
is-
energy.
and dispersing the energy. Yeah, because an emotion is arising into awareness, and we have to handle it correctly. It's almost like a relay race, like a torch, where if you don't pass that torch on, it's going to burn your house down. It's just like, if you don't handle your emotions well, they just get worse, right? If you suppress your anger, what happens?
Yeah, you blow up.
Yeah, you blow up.
Or you
And it's the
become
same thing
numb.
with anxiety. If you don't relate to anxiety correctly, you become more anxious. This is the case with a lot of addictions, right? A lot of people who struggle with addiction, there's an avoidance tendency within them. Part of the problem is they don't know how to approach life. None of us do. But there's an avoidance, and alcohol or drugs, they facilitate that avoidance. It's escapism.
Yep.
And so, but what happens with that? You become more avoidant. Those emotions just get stronger, and then you got to do more drugs.
Yeah, and the thing, of course, primarily what's happening is we're not facing the thing that is causing us to be avoidant, right? So we're not growing spiritually, psychologically, we're becoming less rational, less capable, more narrow, more confined.
You're
We're
working
imprisoning
against
ourselves.
life.
Working
And
against
this is,
life, yeah.
Yeah, you're working. And so this is one of the things, like when we talk about, there are 8 billion people on the planet, and everybody is like, well, I have my own reality, my own, and you should respect my opinion. No. There are 8 billion people on this planet who are all misperceiving the way. We are all misperceiving a fundamental. It's complex. There are many ways to the truth, but not every way leads to the truth, right? So we're delusional on some level, right? We're misperceiving, misrelating. We're not being mindful, and so we have to clarify this. In as much as you experience pain in your life, it is often resistance to life. It's that you are fundamentally working against your own life, right? Your own existence. And we do that in a variety of ways. So one of the ways that we do that is by not understanding. And this is where that analysis phase comes in, because we need to see and understand not only why do I feel this way, but what is that deep evolutionary programming that's trying to get me to act in a certain way. This allows us a chance. So when you look at, my anger, so I stub my toe, I want to punch the wall because I stubbed my toe, I can consciously choose, like, okay, so I'm reflexively, animalistically trying to assert a boundary. I don't need to do that, right? I can practice releasing that. So I no longer need the emotion because I've consciously chosen. But the emotion originally arose so I would engage in this conscious self-direction. Because if you don't consciously direct your life, something has to. Something has to move us around. And so that's what our emotions do while we are not self-aware. When we're not self-aware, we're being controlled by our drives, our instincts, our subconscious mind.
Yes. Yep. And so this is some of the way that I kind of work through this stuff, and when I'm coaching people, I kind of take them through a process, something like this as well. So it seems like it tracks along with this. Like, let's just say frustration rises. I'm in the car, I'm driving, I hit a traffic jam, and I'm late, and I start gripping the wheel and tensing up, and I'm shouting. I'm like, oh, come on, man. And now I'm all frustrated.
Yeah.
All right. So most people, it seems like, they just accept that this is just the way it is. This is just how they respond, da-da-da. They do their best to get through the traffic, show up for their meeting, and try to not be a ball of stress, and things like that. But we can, if we look at it, we can say, okay, as you're saying, where is this frustration coming from? So we can start to turn the light around and look inside.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so it's likely coming from, I'm trying to control the situation, which is outside of my control.
Mm-hmm.
I want to change it, I want to control it, but I can't, and so I'm frustrated. Yeah. And so that takes us to like the first steps of the psychology we were talking about, where I just need to look inside and know where my feelings are coming from. And again, that's not enough. So if I just say, okay, now I understand, and now I can keep going, but I didn't really necessarily get to the root of it, because why am I trying to control things? I didn't ask that question. Why? I'm trying to control things because I'm not in control, and that terrifies me.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I don't want to look at that fear. I don't want to face the fact that I'm not in control and deal with the fear that that brings up. So I try to control things that are beyond my control, and when it doesn't seem to work, I get frustrated. And these are all strategies that I layer on top of my psyche so that I don't have to look deeper and actually face it. But if I face it, I don't need to know where it came from. I don't need to know the circumstances that drove it. All I just need to do is make contact with it, stay with it, know it, see it, feel it, allow it to release, and then now I'm coming back to balance and harmony and center.
Yeah. And if we can have a strategy, right, where we see the experience of emotions as, so there, you know, there's a couple of pieces to this. I'll just speak on briefly. If we have an understanding of like, what is the function of anger? What is the function? And what I mean by function is, how does it control us? What is it trying to get us to do? So the emotions have two broad kind of impetuses or purposes. One is it regulates your internal experience, right? You have an internal reaction. So if I'm depressed, I might withdraw, I might become introspective, I might, my energy might go down, right? I become, really subdued and lethargic, so I don't make the same mistake again, right? There are all these things that constrain us, and they're like approximations. Sometimes they work. Sometimes embodying your depression might keep you from making the same mistake. It might bring about some self-awareness. So again, we have to think of emotions not as good or bad, but they're information. The second part of emotions is they aren't even really yours. So what I mean by that is, when I'm depressed, it is meant to signal and influence someone else. Even if I'm alone, I'm bearing witness, and it's trying to influence awareness that's witnessing me. So my depression is supposed to elicit from you what? If you saw me crying in the corner, right, and I'm so sorry, it elicits something from you. It affects you because we're social animals. So this is the other reason why it's so important that we relate correctly to our emotions, because they're not just controlling us, they're controlling everyone around us.
Manipulating people.
Yeah. It's manipulation, which is, again, non-judgmentally, it's like, of course, everything is a manipulation. You just want it to be a skillful manipulation, right? We don't want to be unknowingly. And this is a lot of pathology, right? Is people who are inadvertently, their secondary gain, or there may be even awareness to it, but they're influencing everyone around them with their borderline personality disorder, right? Or their PTSD, or their depression or anxiety, not even realizing that's a component of why they're feeling what they're feeling.
So this is, I've been using situations like examples like this as a way of highlighting this and pointing out how shameful that is.
It could be.
And what I mean by, I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek here, but what I mean by to be outrageously affecting everyone around you negatively and to not be aware of it is shameful. Like if you could pull back and then see yourself doing it, you'd be like, oh my God, what did I do? You'd be horrified.
Infinitely
but we don't
offended
see
by
that.
Others.
And so and it's like this all the time with little things. So we're not necessarily projecting all this stuff in a way that people can perceive, but what I've been directing people to do is just play this game. Just imagine that all of your secret thoughts, your hidden
impulses, compulsions, emotional reactivities, the shit that you're carrying around that you don't want people to see, that you're hiding. Just pretend that it's blatantly obvious
Difficult,
to everyone.
Yeah.
And
It's a
start
great
living
practice.
like that. And it was radically freeing.
Yeah.
And
No, that's
also
an excellent practice.
revealing. Super revealing, like, oh, because now every time it comes up, instead of going, oh, that's a bad thought, don't think that. It's like, nope, let's expose it. It's already out of the bag. Everyone sees it. Everyone knows it. Now, let me, become intimate with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, in the book and in, just in general, I consider it's one of the three necessities. So, you're probably familiar, in like Taoism, there are three jewels, and then there are, three treasures, so the three jewels are something like moderation, compassion, and humility. And then the three treasures are Jing, Qi, and Shen. But I think that there are three things that are necessities for us to grow, and one of them is honesty. So what do you, and this is why that rationality component is so important, because it's like, if you're lying to yourself endlessly, you're lost. You can never make sense of anything. And so we have to practice a profound honesty. The other, so the three necessities, I think, or it's that kind of piercing honesty that you're talking about, where even your thoughts are externalized and imagining that everyone can see them and feel them, and your emotions as well. And then there's perspective shifting. If you're stuck, right, this is the problem with identification with ego, is you're stuck from one vantage point. Everything is just a collection of associations, of experiences you've had. And it's like, if I kind of like the analogy of, it's like, if I'm an angry person, it's sort of like if I close my eyes and I go out and drive my car, I'm gonna wreck the car eventually because my eyes are closed. So it's the same thing. If we have something like anger, or it could be depression, could be anything that controls us, we lose all those degrees of freedom in our life, and that thing is going to more and more influence and control us. And so unless you can get outside of that, which is part of the purpose of awareness, right? It's why it's so important to cultivate self-awareness. You're stuck. It's like you're an automaton. You're just, I've heard people use all kinds of somewhat derogatory terms, like non-human, or things like that around it. But I mean, it's just, you don't have any degrees of freedom.
NPC.
Yeah, you're an NPC, right? And that's not why we're here.
So one thing I have noticed to a degree is there seems to be this common thread that happens to a percentage of people when they begin the self-growth path, let's say, personal development in whatever form, is that it works really well in the initial stages. They get like this initial boost, right? A jump. But then at a certain point, it can, I've just been witnessing this, make them a bit even more neurotic. They can start to get almost worse, because now they're hyper aware of the problem.
Yeah.
But they don't have a solution really, a songgong developed, right? A releasing skill. And so,
and that's a great point. Like, why do we need to develop that skill? Why is that a principal skill in Buddhism and any authentic, traditional cultivation kind of practice? How can we focus on anything, right, without surrendering everything else? So it goes both ways. It's like, in cultivating surrender, it is also cultivating the capacity to be focused and purposeful. That's a lot of the practice, a lot of what people struggle with in meditation, right, or in anything that we do. It's getting out of your own way. You have to surrender, right? You open the body, release the mind, let everything settle. It's that idea of like, what is that? All the colloquial sayings, it's like when someone has has chi in their belly, right? When they have sunk and released, they are centered, right? They are balanced, they are grounded, they are rooted, they are stable. If your energy and you're stuck in the mind, it's like a teeter-totter. It isn't balanced. It's always going to be influencing things. So we need to be able to focus on one thing. Otherwise, our life energy is scattered. Otherwise, our willfulness, our purposefulness, our direction, you're going, it's like that, wasn't there an old Russian saying, trying to sit in two chairs at the same time. You're gonna end up on your ass. So that analysis, kind of going back, that analysis phase, we need to understand two things. Why am I feeling this way? And then what is that feeling trying to compel me to do? How is it trying to control me? And this is known observationally internally. Like you were saying, we turn our awareness inside. So it's how often do we have emotions about things? Pretty dang often. And so it's a great catalyst for us to do something with that internal focus, right? It's part of why we have the capacity to focus internally. So how we relate to our emotions, that experience, can have a profound effect if we consciously choose. Because in each moment, two things are happening. You and I, we are who we are. But there's that. The most likely thing that's going to happen is we're going to reiterate, and we're going to be the same person again and again. We're choosing the same, or we're not even consciously choosing. So you're just compounding the problem.
Yeah, I was I think there's a name for this, where you're basically, like, our minds are often doing this where we're approaching a situation, and I think you said that we were usually seeing the past earlier, and we're approaching a situation, and rather than try to, use all of our attention and energy to take the best outcome based on what's present here and now, our minds are like, oh, this is like that thing before that happened, and last time we did this, and it worked out okay, so we'll do that again. Right.
Which is the strategy, right? It makes sense that life would do that. An example of this is, because we live in a world, I would say up until I wrote that book, it's not well known. These principles aren't super well known. But, if you were to give advice to men, what do you do with your emotions? This is bad advice, but it's like you can see why it came about. You tell them to suppress their emotions. You tell them not to feel their emotions, because what's going to happen if men go around feeling their feelings? Like, I don't know about you, but if I had a hand grenade and a rocket launcher, at least in the past, there would have been days, I could have destroyed the world when I was angry. Right? So are you going to tell men to feel their feelings? That's pretty stupid advice. Yeah, and so the same thing with women, it's like that, the general advice of women cultivating and feeling their feelings, right? It has function, it has purpose in life, as nurturers in general. I'm speaking in generalities, because there are biological bases to those generalities, right? It's not, everything is not just a social construct. Society comes from biology. Society comes from history and biology and a convergence of things. It's not just a made up thing.
These are radical concepts, brother. You're going to get us shadow banned here.
Exactly. So, but what's the detriment of that, right? You end up with women in general who are very submissive, right? Who feel everything, who relate to everything through feelings, and also don't know how to relate to their feelings. And then you have men and women with these two approaches trying to find some middle ground, and it isn't going to happen, right? Men not feeling anything and women feeling everything, right? That's those two approaches are going to conflict, and it's because neither approach is correct. It's just not correct.
Yeah, I convinced myself at a young age that I didn't have emotions. I was like, yeah, I don't have emotions. Those are silly.
Yeah.
Girls have that,
Yeah. And this is, I mean, it is that imposed by society and, watching Arnold Schwarzenegger movies growing up or whatever, yeah, but it's also like, even when men, and I'm sure you've obviously done this, where it's like, you've let go of the external things and you just looked at, what does it mean to be a man? Internally, I am that example. Like, I don't have to look at external references to know what being a man is. I whatever that is, I'm that, right, on some level, at least experientially. And there's all kinds of stuff going on in there. It's like I wouldn't say I'm a highly emotional person anymore, because I'm generally pretty well regulated, meaning I'm relating to my emotions correctly and they don't have to control me. Right, anywhere near as much. And so, this is one of the things, where we say that someone who can do that is stable, right? Yeah. And that's what we want. Yeah, you don't want to be going through life with all these highs and lows and your emotions jerking you around because you're not consciously relating to your experiences correctly.
Well, and the more presence and self-awareness we develop, the faster we catch the fact that we are experiencing an emotion. Like, I can recall for sure at some point being like, I'm not angry.
You're right, yeah. Exactly.
Or whatever, because the anger had taken hold of me fully before I had a chance to be aware of it. Now it's like the moment things start rising, it's like, okay, wait a minute. Oh, anger is arising. Isn't that interesting? Oh, okay. And I don't want to let the anger take me over and act it out, and I don't want to suppress it either. Like, I moved beyond those two patterns, so now it's like, okay, well, we're going to investigate this.
Well, and you can see this with a lot of, distortions of this with, like some gurus or, famous meditators, and they're always placid.
Yes.
And
I've been there.
Yeah, well, and there is a component of that where, that's natural when we're meditating, but it really is a releasing process. There should be a vitality within you, right? I mean, the rosy cheeks and, you can see the fullness. It isn't that you're not full of life. We release and open so that we can fill, and so that's something you can misrelate to the process in that way and just become dead, right? Dead sitting and lifeless. And I call it the dead man's rule, and it's like anything a dead man can do better than you, that should not be your objective. That can't be your goal. That can't be the outcome, right? And a dead man can sit there lifeless a hell of a lot better than you or I can, So, we need to understand that, and, we need to aspire for more than that.
Yes. Yep. Well, I think, for myself, it probably came from a lot of different things, but one of them being like, I should be this way, right? And not ever really deciding to be that, right? But this is how I should be as a spiritual person, as a teacher, whatever. And so this is how I am. And but that takes management. And so this is sort of a colloquialism I've been developing here. Is like, if it requires management, it means I haven't become it yet.
Yeah.
Seems pretty
well,
obvious.
In the idea, you brought up the idea of control, a number of times, and it's because it's one of the most fundamental forms of misrelating. We're not here to, what are you controlling, right? The best we can do is harmonize with. It's not that we have no influence. It's not that. You're alive. It's that we need to harmonize with. We need to understand the direction that life is going with, and we need to work with it. If you do that, how can you ever lose? If you work with your own life, how can you ever fail? You may not have easy experiences. Like, life will, it'll kick your butt no matter what. It has to transform us. But the idea of adversity is what causes adaptation. It's the training is what changes you, right?
So this is it's interesting because I've been thinking about this a bit. Where if we come back to like the whole random number generator thing, and I haven't done the experiments, but I'm sort of assuming that it's like this, and maybe you can confirm it. I did a little research that I got some confirmation of it, but it's like if I'm influencing the random number generator and I'm really trying to grab hold of those numbers and change them, I end up having worse results than if I relax, release, connect. Very subtle intention of leaning towards a pleasant desire to witness a few more of those sevens coming up or something like that, and it ends up working better. And so to me in life, the most empowered position is harmony and balance. And at that point, like if there's systems running and I want to influence these systems, I can just start throwing wrenches into everything, and I don't like this system, so I'm going to destroy it. And and I'm going to really put more energy into this one, pump it up, and yeah, that has effects for sure, and maybe it gives me some of what I want, but also creates a lot of havoc,
stupid effects,
probably won't lead to fulfillment in the end. Whereas harmonizing is more like I'm unified with the machine itself, and I'm just nudging it here and there, just little nudges. Staying balanced, not overreaching, not losing my center, but just giving it those nudges. And it seems like that would, the same kind of influence of the random number generator would have the greatest effect and impact.
Which is another one of the reasons why mindfulness is valuable, right? It's like, so there are three fundamental human drives. It's any living system. These drives exist and are sort of like the basic building blocks that everything else stacks on top of and tries to coordinate with. And so those three drives are connection. Everything is connected. That's why we have a drive to connect, right? So it's these are pathways to truth. There's the drive to understand, because everything has order, meaning, present, past, future, right? There's information that we need to coordinate with from our relative position. Mm-hmm. And then there's assertion, and that assertion is you are alive, right? Whether you want to be or not, you are taking up space. Your choices, even not choosing, is a choice. So you exist. And so from that collection, those three things, we're practicing those things, trying to find harmony and balance in those things, because that allows us to be a part of everything functionally, not just like you're saying, throwing wrenches into it and running against it and wanting to jump off a bridge. It's right, you're working with life. And like I said, when you work with life instead of just trying to impose your own will, there's no freedom in control. Mm-hmm. We think we want to control everything, but how much freedom would you have if you had to control everything? Like you'd be paralyzed. That's all you would be doing, right? And that's what happens with a lot of really neurotic people, is like they can't go outside because they haven't brushed their teeth 15 times or checked the doorknob 18 times, or there's no freedom in that kind of approach to life.
Yep. Or they're consumed with this one outcome, and it's a constant source of stress. And then as they start to get it, then all the resources become devoted to keeping it.
Yeah.
And so I thought I'd be free of stress once I got the thing just so. But it turns out there's no less stress to try to enforce my will upon it and keep it going just so the way that I want it.
If you're going to impose your will on the universe, everything. How can you ever succeed and maintain that? And we all do that, right? I mean, that's, when I was much younger, and there's an aspect of my personality, I'm sure, that's kind of like that, where it's like, I'll find a way, it's like, and some of that is healthy, but some of that is definitely something we have to temper with some awareness, because you can sit there and curse, the heavens and feel like life is punishing you, or you can realize that the adversity, the hardship, the pain, the struggle is just enough that if you surrender a little bit and work with it and develop a little bit of self-awareness, it's all for you. It's all for you in your own development and growth.
So let's say, all right, so you brought up trying to impose your will on the entirety of the universe and how absurd that is,
Yeah.
unless the will that you're imposing on the universe is to be exactly as you are.
Mm-hmm.
That's my will for you. Just be exactly as you are.
It's kind of a tricky piece, because what else can we be, right? But life will support a certain amount of like reiterations. It's like crocodiles haven't changed much in, millions of years. It works, right? Life, at least materiality, will support a certain amount of that. But it's not the purpose of life.
Well, this is where I wanted to go with it. I'm glad you went there, because there's this idea, and I fell into it for a good while, and it's a trap, which is that like the goal is to accept everything as it is and to surrender. And that's like step one.
Yeah.
But then what, right? So I let the universe be exactly as it is. And I am free. I'm free of trying to control it, free of trying to change it, free of reacting to it. But now what?
Yeah.
Now what? So
that isn't acceptance. So this is, and I don't know that there's a better word for it. I just would like to hijack the word acceptance and actually give it some real meaning, rather than it being like, well, it is what it is. So one of the first things that we have to accept is that nothing is what it is. Everything is impermanent and changing. It's the nature of existence is that, most of us get fixated on the idea of impermanence, meaning everything is going to die and it's going to end. But that's permanent, right? In the way a lot of us think about it, a lot of us struggle with the concept of death, and we approach death from this idea of, everything is impermanent, but then you're also just collapsing back into the idea that, okay, well, you're dead and there's nothing. But that's not how everything works. Everything is impermanent, meaning energy isn't created or destroyed. It's transformed. Everything is transformed. And so we have to practice and cultivate an acceptance that includes the idea of impermanence and transformation, transition. And so what that means is if I'm 300 pounds and I'm sitting, eating Cheetos on my sofa, it isn't, well, I'm fat, I'm 300 pounds.
It is what it is.
Accept it. It is what it is. That isn't acceptance. Acceptance is, I am 300 pounds. So taking in the totality, having some real self-awareness, really drawing in the fullness. I don't feel good. My life isn't fulfilling. I'm not tending to my body, right? I'm not taking care of something that's principle. So we have to accept that we are living beings and that there's a purpose to life. And if we accept that invitation to that purpose, then you can have a fulfilling life. But otherwise you're going to be working against life. And I think that kind of, truncated version of acceptance that a lot of people talk about is it's a death trap, right? And you can see the pathology that comes from that idea of like, oh, well, just is what it is. And it's like, that isn't engagement. That isn't assertion or fullness in living.
Yeah, it is a strategy for avoidance.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that brings us back, though. So how does one derive purpose? Maybe we can tie this together with the jump from analysis to liberation and developing the Songgong.
Yeah. So it's an individual process, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a more universal purpose to life. Yeah. So why do we have a body? Right? If you were to kind of question that and look at that, you might say, okay, well, why do I have kidneys and a stomach and intestines and lungs? All these things support a mind. So we have a body so that we can have a mind. Why do we have a mind? Well, the thing universally is experience. So the mind exists so that experience can exist. So why do we need experience? What's the deal with experience? Experience allows awareness, whatever that is, and it's ineffable. It's not a thing, but it is. You have it, I have it, awareness exists. It allows awareness to become more aware, which is one of the principal drives of awareness, right? It makes sense. That which is aware, it's seeking more awareness.
Yeah.
And in that it has incarnated, infested, embodied in various forms. An elephant has a touch of that, but it is aware through the experiences of elephant. You have your own subjective experiences. I have my own subjective experiences. And these are ways that awareness can become more aware. Mm-hmm. That's one of the functions of awareness, but it's a key one. And so it's a key function of life. It draws us back, though, kind of to an important idea. How do you know what to focus on? It's as clear as day. It's proximal. Your experiences, your internal experiences come first. They're inescapable. You have to purposefully, intentionally relate to what is inside. You also can't escape your body. You can't escape it. So you have to, life is telling you, hey, you got to focus on this thing. Stuff that's happening across the world, stuff that's happening to other people, that's external. What defines internal and external is that the internal can be known fully. You can truly know thyself. And so if there is some influence, self-directedness, purposefulness, it is best, most effectively kind of cultivated in this internal work. It's like we were saying, you can't control what you do in the outside world. I could do everything perfectly. I could drive my car perfectly home tonight. I could still wreck, right? So the external are things that there's space, distance, maybe it's perception, right? From a non-dual perspective, when you're able to drop that, it just is. But we don't start from that position, and that's part of the purposefulness, is that it collapses us into ourselves so that we will at least cultivate correct relating to these experiences so that we can have a relationship with, you could call it the divine, you could call it the universe, nature, you could call it God. But if we can't relate to ourselves correctly, right? Mm-hmm. How are you going to relate to something that's, multidimensional and eternal, to the fullness of existence correctly? You're not.
Well, this is very profound. So, one of the things that I think Sifu Adam was talking about this out at the Milwaukee camp where we met, mm-hmm. Which was, before you can know who you are, you have to know what you are. Yeah. And this is something that is grossly overlooked, not seen by the vast majority of people claiming to know, mm-hmm. is that you can know yourself by knowing your mind and the contents of your mind. Mm-hmm. And it's not possible, is it?
Intellect is one sliver of what awareness is aware of. It's one sliver. can you think about anything of which you are not aware?
Seems challenging.
You can. Intellect is, it's an experience within the field of awareness. It's not even a sliver of awareness. It's an experience. It's one of the many experiences that we can have within awareness, whatever awareness is. So there is that, and what are we, right? We are, I'll kind of cheat out on this one a little bit. I'll take the easy road on this one. We're potential. And the meaning of your life isn't how does my potential match up to someone else's, right? If I'm born without legs, I'm not going to comparing myself to someone who has legs. That's a fool's game. It isn't. There's no comparison. We're all different in fundamental ways, and we don't choose those things. Like you don't choose. At least you don't remember, right? What family you were born into, what skin color you have. You don't choose your disposition. You don't choose your intelligence. Like, what do you choose, right? I mean, if I could choose, I'd look different. I'd be a hell of a lot smarter, and would have done things differently. Maybe along the course of my life. I'm speaking from kind of a shallow identified perspective. That isn't the answer. We are potential, and our job is to maximize that potential. It's what you do with what you are. It isn't how you stack up against other people.
So this brings about a great sense of relief also when it's understood and recognized, right? It's like, oh, I'm not just in this world to stand out, to make a name for myself, to keep up with the Joneses, or just to get by or what have you, but it's really that I am this ball of potential, multifaceted, multidimensional, capable of evolving itself on multi-strata levels, and my purpose is to do just that, to evolve it. So to increase the quality and brightness of my awareness and consciousness, to take good care of my body. And these would be primary, the internals, right? And of course, we could talk about, the energy system as well. And then, so this is like, I struggled with finding purpose for a long time. And then I thought I had found the purpose. And it was kind of like back to that that realization I was talking about before, where it's like, oh, just let things be as they are. My purpose is to just do God's will and be a presence, and, that's that. But it sort of was a little bit hollow. So, what the hell am I supposed to do? I need some direction here. But when I realized that, okay, my actual purpose is to grow my consciousness, become more balanced and harmonious, and reduce entropy in my mind and my body, transform my being. Oh, so what do I do for a career? What do I do out in the world? What do I do with relationships? That's easy. That's a simple answer. I just express these qualities that I'm cultivating and developing. I find ways to express them into my relationships, into my career, into my life path and things.
It all comes from the internal. Yeah, everything.
Those are just vehicles now. Instead of thinking the vehicle is the thing. Oh, when I get the car, all my problems will be solved. I'll be fulfilled for eternity. No, it's the process of who you become in getting the car or whatever it is. That's what really matters. That's what you have to take with you.
And what compels us? Where's the carrot in all this? And the carrot is love. We aspire, we follow love. We're constantly chasing it. But what is love asking of us? So we're all looking for love, right? And that love is one of the things that, whether it's divine love, whether it's, having a beautiful girlfriend, whatever it is, that's sort of what we're after. Self-love, right? You hear this, everybody, talking about, well, you need to love yourself more. Yeah. You don't control love. Love is it's a fierce, flaming sword that you are much more likely to stab yourself with or poke your own eye out with, right? So it's like love is not blind. We are blind. We're blind. We need to learn what it is that love is asking of us. And it's asking the same essential things. I usually present it in a slightly different way as our fundamental drives. It's asking us to connect. It's asking us to understand. And it's asking us to recognize the impermanence of all of this, the ever-changing, living progression of all of this. When those qualities exist, love shows up.
Yes, yeah, I agree. That's like, it's not something that you cultivate directly so much as you create the container for.
Right.
And so, like, with the internal arts practice, for instance, like this was occurring to me recently, where it's like, if I can experience 100 units of joy in my life, right, and that's my current configuration, that's just how I can, like, I never thought of this in this way before, that joy is different to different people. Some people might be able to experience 200 units of joy as a possibility. Some people might experience 500. Some people's max might be like 10 units of joy. So they're having the best day of their lives. Everything is working out great and perfect, and they're at a level 10. And it's awesome for them. With the internal arts, well, first, obviously, we have to clean up the psychology, start to do that work, unraveling things, getting to more of the roots. But then also the literal transformation of the body through, like, the I Ching Jing practice or the other, body opening Neigongs and things, that it completely, radically alters our capacity for these qualities.
Yeah.
Like, one change in my joints could take me from having a max capacity of 100 units of joy to having a max capacity of 500 or even 1,000 units of joy, simply because I opened a joint that was stuck.
You change the landscape and the scene changes. Yeah, you can see a lot more. Yeah.
And now on an average, like this, I try to use these analogies to get people to understand, to hopefully inspire them to, like, because this work is very hard and it takes a long time really to start getting massive results, like mind-blowing results. It takes a long time, a lot of effort. But if you can get this, it's like, if my average day now is 500 units of joy, where before my best day ever was 100 units of joy, I'm living a life that's inconceivable to what it was before, and nothing really has to change externally.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because we're relating differently. We are different, right?
Yes.
And that, going back to the idea of what's the purpose of life, the purpose of life is that you're co-creating. You're taking what it is that you have to work with, and even though there's not a high degree of control, like you're saying, part of it is fate, right? There is this dynamic where I may do these practices for the rest of my life, but exactly how far that goes, right, it's beyond me. But that doesn't mean that I don't have a path. That doesn't mean that I don't have a purpose, right? It's just that I don't control every wind in that road. And so we have to surrender to that. But that's also what makes it exciting. It's kind of like ESP, it's like a lot of people, are like, gosh, I wish I knew. But it's like, if you did know, you would screw it all up. You would shortchange every experience that you ever had. You'd avoid every pain, every hardship. You'd be super rich and you'd do all these things, right? You would misuse that kind of power or control, and that's why we don't have it, because the universe is not going to let you overthrow it in your stupidity. We have a limited ability to influence until we do the internal work, and some of that internal work has influence in the external world. You felt it, I felt it, you've seen it probably, I've seen it. There are things beyond the ordinary modes of knowing. and experiencing, but that doesn't mean you can't be made aware of them once in a while. You get thrown across the room, by your Tai Chi teacher, right? And or just can feel, you can just feel that there's more going on.
Oh yeah. Well, side note, but AI is going to severely test the truth of that statement, that the universe is not going to allow itself to be overthrown via ignorance.
Right. Yeah. True.
Hopefully you're right.
Yeah. True.
But yeah, so take us through to the end, that bridge between analysis and liberation.
Yeah.
And what we can expect.
So the analysis process, right? We're cultivating purposeful self-awareness that is aligning us with the internal, and we're using that awareness to consciously choose. So the interface in each moment is, I am who I am, but then there also is a potential to become. That's life, right? That's the point that we're all looking for, is like, when can I transform myself? We were talking about freedom earlier and how it's like, it doesn't exist if it's just in your mind. It has to be lived. What good is it if it's not lived? And so in this moment, I can consciously choose how I'm relating to my internal experience. As soon as I'm doing that, I am transforming and transcending from what I was. It is the catalyst, the soup, the cauldron of my own becoming. And this is part of the reason why we cultivate present-mindedness and acceptance and right view, is that it's like, without that, you can't change, right? You're doomed to repeat the same mistakes. So that liberation occurs through that conscious interface and through us acting, through the tangible lived experience, right? It's like in Tai Chi, you transform yourself by doing the work. You can have all the fancy ideas, you can know every muscle in the body, you can, use fancy foreign language for, energy, and none of that has any real meaning. So it's through the lived experience. And this is one of the things I think that's most important, and I think one of the coolest things about the real approach, that's exactly what I'm saying, is that through the mundane, through the tangible, through the physical, we are working towards the ultimate goal, which is using the self to transcend the self, right? To become more than just what we were. And that's the path, right?
Beautiful, man. Yeah. I think about it like this sometimes, where if I have goals, things I'm trying to create and do and become and achieve and all this sort of stuff, and if it seems like some of those goals are just further away than they were yesterday, and things are not working out the way that I want them to, I can become anxious, worried, concerned, depressed, or maybe I just think I need to push myself harder, all these kinds of things. Or if my notion is that the purpose, my goal, is internal before anything, then I have to consider, and if my goal is an internal one, like let's say I want to transform my consciousness and being, raise the light of awareness, cultivate and develop to a high degree these low entropy states like love, joy, harmony, freedom, adventure, fun, non-seriousness, fearlessness, all these things, then I must consider that the conditions of my life, just as they are perfect.
Acceptance, right? We have to work with what is on some level, but it's work with what is. It's just like ourself. Yeah. A lot of people, I can't tell you how many times I've heard this from clients, I want, you should love me for who I am. I want to find someone who loves me for me. Love me for me. No. It doesn't work that way. I mean, who have you ever met that what they are, right, is lovable? What's lovable is the potential within us if we're working on that. If we're working on ourselves, if we're living, right, then yeah, that's lovable. No matter what the conditions are, no matter how hard or how much of a struggle you might have in life, it's like if you're punching yourself in the face while you're doing that struggle, it's not really lovable because it doesn't allow you to connect, understand, or see the impermanent kind of beauty, the transcendent quality of existence. So we have to work on making ourselves lovable, which means you're working with life and you're cultivating what it is that you are. If anything is us, it's that. It's not the
popular opinion in some circles.
Yeah, but it's just wrong. Anything other than that is just obviously
I'm
wrong.
with you, but there's the the cry of the narcissistic type personality is like, if you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best.
Right. Yeah, what's your best look like, though? Let's see that, because maybe my ability to tolerate you at your worst is dependent on what you look like at your best. But a lot of these people, right, who, that might be their mantra, it's like they never have a best. Like, it's just an excuse to not work on themselves.
Well, if you would just fix yourself, maybe I could reveal it to you.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, these things do more, so we're saying that this kind of real approach, you can hear it, it's a psychological framework. It's a somewhat complete model of, why do we have emotions? Where did, what's the function of emotions? How do we need to relate to emotions? How does that cultivate consciousness and self-awareness? How does that interaction lead to our self-awareness and ultimately transcendence of self, just where awareness is aware of more than just the self, right? So self-awareness is kind of one of the first processes where awareness actually is being aware of itself instead of what your neighbors are doing, or, that you want to become a lawyer when you grow up or some external thing. But that once you cultivate a capacity, a skill of being self-aware, you're skillful enough to be aware of more than just the self.
Interesting. Yeah, most people, I think, well, I don't know if it's most, but a lot of people seem to think that self-awareness is the goal. Like, that's just, you've arrived once you become self-aware. But that's a good, I like that way of looking at it. To me, it's like you go in until the in is so full that the awareness can go out and not lose the in. But if I'm just going out, I lose what's in to be able to direct my attention externally. So it's like my mind is a servo mechanism. It just fluctuates in, out, in, out. I think it does. I think it did this for a long time. It still does it. Natural to a degree. But when we can go in and stay in and then expand outward, I think this is more akin to presence.
Well, and this is one of the secrets, which I know in meditation, where most people sit there, right, and on their cozy cushions and their music going and the incense burning, not facing any sensory adversity, not overcoming anything, they're just not experiencing. Even in that state, it's to a lot lesser degree, but you are conserving energy. You are acquiring energy. And if you sit long enough, if you sit, for many years, there is a fullness, right? And that fullness, like in Tai Chi, can become Pong, in Taoist meditations, it can be used, to do all kinds of things, depending on the tradition. And so that hidden piece where it's like, even if you are in your mind, even if you are struggling, just the mudra of the body and the body sitting and us trying, right? Because meditation shouldn't be easy. Right. I think that's the other kind of bizarre concept, is that, like, if it's not easy, like, something's wrong. Like, meditation is not, you sit for 4 hours in full lotus and see how easy it is. It isn't easy, but we do need to approach it with an effortlessness, right? But it's through skill that things become effortless.
Yeah.
You're not going to
Sure.
start and things are going to be effortless and easy. It's through serious skill and transformation. that
Yeah, well,
something
this is the
becomes
whole of the error in the Tai Chi community, is that you start with learning the form, and you slow movements, graceful, so lovely presence, and it's nothing. There's nothing in it.
Yeah.
It's just assuaging the mind
Yeah.
temporarily, and not to say that it's all bad. It's got benefits for sure, but it's not internal transformation. It's not Neigong. It's not any of that. That stuff is so profound, and like this is for me like where it really gets exciting, because this work is hard. It's so difficult, and like there has to be a carrot at the end of it, or like, why am I doing it? Am I just doing it to manage my life so I don't drive myself nuts? Maybe in the beginning that's why I do it, because things are so bad that just a little bit of peace and freedom from the awfulness that life and my own mind really more than anything seems to be doing to me. But I want to encourage people to try to move through that phase as quickly as possible, because the stuff at the end of it is fucking unreal and profound and vivifying and richly rewarding, deeply fulfilling, beyond what we can put into words. And we'll never get there until we do this work and go through the stage, which is another massive misconception and error along the path, which is that if I don't experience it, it doesn't exist. Or if I'm not experiencing what you're saying, then whatever you're saying must just be kind of like what I experienced, but a little bit different. Right? I'm trying to make these parallels so that I can have some understanding, which is normal and natural. That's how human beings function. But it's grossly inaccurate.
Yeah, simply, it's like the scientific method, right? Where it's like, if we can't control it and replicate it, everything is like Occam's razor. It's like reduced down to the simplest possible kinds of terms. And then, generally, scientists kind of make fun of people who experience, have real experiences that extend beyond that. And they call those people simplistic. And it's like, well, whose view of the world is simplistic? The scientist who's saying everything is, this reductionistic, mechanical, process, or the person who's saying, I think there's something more here, right? And there are these areas of experience, and me as being a part of the universe, those experiences have validity. Like there is validity to subjective experience. It's part of the process. Everything that exists has its purpose in place. So yeah, we can't discount things and reduce the world into these kinds of ways. But going back to what we were talking about, it's why the approach. Because if you approach the world through a sexist lens, everything is going to look sexist. If you look at the world through a political lens, it's not that everything in the world is political. It's that you're looking at everything that you see, you're converting it into that. And so we have to extract ourselves. And that's why that second, kind of necessity is perspective shifting that I was talking about, way earlier. Because if you get trapped within your specific way of looking at things, it's going to contaminate everything that you see.
Yes, yeah, that's why I love frames. Putting frames on things to where I can always derive some benefit, some transformation, some realization, something that's going to move me forward, regardless of what the circumstances are. Like, because if I don't do that, I'm just a victim of circumstance. That doesn't help me. So if I can frame it in a way to where I'm empowered in some way, any capacity, if I'm empowered, that's useful. Which goes back to, I guess, the rational. The description of that is like, if it works and it's useful and productive, then it's rational.
Can be, yeah. If those qualities of discernment, and mindfulness exist, because the risk is always. And it is true. It's part of the operating error. It's part of why you have to give up the idea of perfection and just do it less incorrectly over time. It's because it's always off, right? And that's fine, because it's like, that's life. You are participating in the grand design, right? You're alive. It's not just a spectator sport. So you are going to change and grow and mature and all these things, and that's awesome. It's great. But one of those hidden pieces of meditation is that accumulation of energy, right? Of not dispersing, not wasting, not scattering, what is meant for your own transformation and awakening. The more of that, chi or prana, that you cultivate and have access to, it's like an alarm bell that can wake you up from your slumber, because we think, and I mean, psychology has done a poor job of exploring this as well, various states of consciousness, where we think that we're awake. But how awake are we? It's a pseudo awakeness. It's we're half awake, half asleep. Just like in a dream where you're controlled by whatever emotional narrative or symbolic struggle is going on, we wake up every day and we still enact the same personality characteristics. We're still controlled and directed by these fundamental forces, and we're unaware of it. So our unawareness, our lack of self-awareness, it's an ignorance, it's a sleepiness, it isn't the piercing quality illumination that we're trying to cultivate, and you need fuel for your lamp. And that's one of the things that, these practices like Tai Chi, like meditation, internal, Qigong cultivate.
Yep. And the watchfulness and the wakefulness, the constant readiness, presence, that all those things talked about. And if we talk about spiritual traditions like Christianity, there's lines such as keep your lamp lit, the master returns at an hour you do not know, and things like this.
I am the truth.
So,
I am the truth, the light, and the way. Right.
It's funny because I won't get into the details of it, but Sifu had reached out to me recently and was just encouraging me a little bit in training, and alluded to the times that are coming. This is going to be necessary. It's going to be necessary. It's not just a nice add-on to your life as it is, but it's a requirement. So I've been talking a lot about developing courage recently, and how necessary that is. And most of us live our lives, again, I'm hope I'm not being too judgmental, but from what I observe, people would rather eliminate the things that cause them fear than to become fearless and courageous. It's a much easier path, or so it seems. But actually the requirement is to become courageous and to develop fearlessness, not to eliminate threats.
Well, otherwise you're taking your potential and you're just neutralizing it, right? It isn't you. You are, if anything, right, how you relate to your experiences. And so, yeah, it's how can you be proud of your life or co-create, and become, if you're running away from your experiences and the potentials that exist because of that? That's the purposefulness and the meaning. It's, bravery, it can lead you to the truth, right? It's necessary. These are things that allow us to unify, allow us to transcend ourselves. They're not luxuries, they're responsibilities. And, life, again, it might tolerate the crocodile, doing its same thing. Maybe on a cosmic scale, reincarnation is an allowance of that, a natural process where it's like things just keep, kind of iterating until, and this is the point, until someone steps up and says, let's do this differently. And then awareness becomes a little bit more aware. The lamp is lit.
Yep. And then when we get there, it seems like from what those who have been there have said, that's just the beginning of a whole other, level of the game.
Yeah.
So it doesn't actually end there either, which is kind of nice and inspiring. Impermanence.
Yeah. Why would it? Yeah. How could it? It's fuller than that. And it's that idea, right? A lot of people are like, oh, well, like when I die, if you're a spiritual person, I'll understand everything then. And it's like, no, you won't. You're not going to just understand everything. You're not just going to become omnipotent, because of some state transition.
I think what we'll understand at that point is, oh, shit, I didn't really die.
Right. Yeah. And the just like in life, there are constraints and limitations, and most of those are internal things that fuel us, through love, compel us to continue to grow and evolve and change, so that, again, awareness can be more aware.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And again, just back to that, growing the container for the love.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So that, again, if my container is like this big and it's got a bunch of leaky holes in it, mm-hmm. and people don't realize, I don't think, that these analogies are this way because they're very close to the
mm-hmm.
to the truth. So if my container's small and leaky, how much love can I cultivate and maintain and then express into the world? Not very much.
Well, and if I'm trying to pour that into something that isn't even the container, what am I going to have to drink from? Right? So, I mean, it's like the internal practice. It channels that energy, in what, Japanese meditation, it's the hara, in Chinese meditation, it's your dantian. It's these, and focusing on the tip of the nose has a similar effect. It has the same effect, essentially, essentially is focusing on the dantian, so there are these kind of shortcut places that we can situate and accumulate awareness, where we're pouring into our own container, right? And also trying to protect that energy. Because any biological thing, right, it's like you have two principal problems. It's energy acquisition and energy expenditure. You got to conserve your energy, and you've got to get energy from somewhere. And so these internal practices are the epitome of that, right? They're the advanced courses in that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like certain things require a certain amount of chi before they will open.
Yeah.
Right? It's just not just that I can do it physically. It needs to fill to a certain degree, and then the filling creates more expansion. I can sort of get the attention in that crack, in that crevice, and then, now it can fill and open up to a more profound depth. But without the initial substance, you don't really get as much.
Yeah, there's nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, like, Adam has mentioned this many times, that it's, because it's true, it's, the chi of, just from the food you eat and what you're born with, maybe prenatal chi is not the same thing as practice chi. It's not the same thing that, you cultivate through these meditational Nigong, or in some ways, I mean, I hate to bastardize Tai Chi and say it's a Qigong practice, but it's, on one level, it's...
Oh, well, you couldn't bastardize it any more than everyone else does. So.
Everyone else does. I try not to, but...
Yeah, I know. I think it's right. It's Qigong, it's Neigong, and it's Tai Chi. It's all these things, right? Because that's part of the transformation process, part of the changing of the body.
So when we unify those two things, when there's conscious self-creation, right? And then there is awareness of that which transcends the self, of a purposefulness, so that we can have energy, right, to sort of use, it's like using a thorn to pull out a thorn. Our identification when we're born, our self-identification, our ego, it's protective. It makes us take on the problems that we need to take on in life so that our life has directionality. It personalizes your journey, right? It's like a bus driver handing you your ticket when you get on board. And through that directionality, our life takes shape, we have experiences, there's opportunity for us to then relate to that in this kind of higher ordered conscious way.
That's starting to sound like a multiplayer virtual reality game.
Yeah, kind of is.
Where, you know, some of your qualities, well, your qualities are kind of just given to you. You get to pick the character maybe, but in this game, I don't know if you get to pick maybe it's just, maybe it's a roulette wheel. And you just put the quarter in and you get the character that you're given. Who knows? But I
don't think it's not that important, but there is a, you know, the devil's in the detail, right? It's like, you know, you may ask for certain qualities in your life, but it's like what you actually end up with is, at least experientially, feels different, but it actually is aligned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's just like, you know, this character's got these skills that are kind of natural to him. He's also got these wounds that are detrimental to him, and now here's how he goes into the game and how do you manage, you know? And so yeah, it's it comes back to that whole thing of, well, how do I grow my character, right, which is grow my being, and how do I transform these things within me? How do I cultivate and develop the skills to a high degree and neutralize or transform the wounds and the detractors so that I can be a complete, whole, and sane person, and be useful for something.
Yeah, because your existence is not just one dimensional, and it's like we do that so that the world isn't a dumpster fire, right? I mean, you know, like the main thing, we live in an age where we used to have external authority, whether it's religion, whether it's government, whether it's, you know, whatever, but that doesn't really exist so much anymore. And it's kind of ushering in a very dangerous time where if we don't take personal responsibility and cultivate conscious morality, the world's going to burn.
Yeah, forget it. I mean, no one is going to do it for you.
No.
Yeah, that is
your life. Yeah, it's why
that illusion is starting to be exposed, right? No one's coming to save us.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Well, so obviously the book, Real Psychology, I'm going to put links in the description for sure so people can find you, and fascinating work. I loved, you know, just how it was just really focusing on, you know, the importance of tuning in, dialing your awareness, going through the buffers of reactivity, and you know, the strategies to cover this stuff up and really start to become intimate with what's going on so we can see it, know it, feel it, and then transmute it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Very much so, man. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming on. How's your training been?
Good. Every day. Yeah, it's something that I've done for many years. I think, I don't know, you know, if I have an innate redeeming quality, it's that I'm persistent as hell. And, you know, I've kind of, while I think if I've had a gift, it's been the capacity to somehow innately find really skillful teachers, whether that's in meditation or it's in Tai Chi, you know, obviously it's, so that's the greatest gift I think anyone could ever get in life, right, is to have a teacher in that way, but then also that kind of coupled with some doggedness and realization, like, no one's going to hand any of this to you. It's your life. You have to, you know, you have to fix yourself. You have to work through these things yourself. People can give you guidance. I do it every day. You know, I see close to, you know, 40 to 50 clients a week, and you know, I tell the same thing to them. It's like, your problems aren't my problems. You know, it's I can't take them on. It's not, this is your work, and I can give you the tools to work on those problems, and with absolute certainty, because I've done it myself, right? It's with total confidence because I'm doing it every day. I'm doing the same work every day. Anything I'd ask of you, I'm doing it 5 times longer when I get home. Whether I'm hungry, sick, tired, whatever it is, it's being done. So
that's funny, you know, talking about sort of love and discipline, and I
You
think
got to
it's
learn to love discipline, right?
I think it's also karma that has brought these teachers to me, because I feel like, I've had, above all, there are two which have been the most impactful in my life, and one really opened my heart and gave me, an inkling into meditation, and the other one really showed me how much work there is to be done still, and let's get to work.
Yeah. Well, and the unification of this work with the psychological, I think, again, is it should be a beautiful marriage. They go together, and I think when we separate them, it can cause all kinds of stagnations and imbalances, because there are a lot of people with a lot of power, but they're nuts.
Well, again, and this is why I'm so appreciative of you for developing and sharing this pathway, because that way, okay, it's not enough to just know how screwed up we are, but give us some direction and a way out,
Yes.
and it seems like that's what you've done with this book. So
It's a lifetime of work.
Approach.
Yeah, there's a lifetime, for all of us in some of these simple ideas, to practice every day.
yeah, man. Well, fantastic having you, man. I
Pleasure.
hope to connect again on one of these, and hopefully see you out at camp next year.
Absolutely. I'll be there.
All right, my friend.
Okay.
Thanks so much,
Good
Scott.
seeing you.
I am Allah, I am Yahweh Ababa. No one may test the Father.